Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our screening and talk. My name is Chedachukwu Agweme, a doctoral student in urban education here at the University of Pittsburgh, and I serve as the graduate student researcher in the Kinloch Commons for Critical Pedagogy and Leadership. Today's program is part of a year of programming, and in that spirit, I would like to say thank you to Dr. Vaught and Dr. Dancy for creating and coordinating this year of study in the Black Fantastic. I would also like to say thank you to Dr. Martez Files, Chris Wright, Emily Conklin, Caitlin Zerker, Christy McGuire, Janelle Levy, and Chelsea Jimenez for their contributions to the year. This year, the Practices of Freedom Project, Center for Urban Education, and the Kinloch Commons for Critical Pedagogy and Leadership join in thematic study around education and the Black Fantastic. As Dr. Vaught said in her opening dialogue with Dr. Damian Sojourner, quote, "We come to this study, of course, through centuries of a horrifically violent world order, and through recent years of both remarkable liberatory movements and change, as well as striking reformulations of repressive power. We have witnessed and participated in global uprisings for racial justice, massive labor strikes connected across seemingly divergent contexts, and unwavering youth movements, and we've all experienced and observed expected counterinsurgent response. Imbricate global escalations of state and allied citizen brutality, from increased militarization of police and militias to live-streamed, unimpeded genocide in Gaza and now the West Bank and across multiple locations on the planet, to the related and compounding ecocides, and of course, to the vicious academic repression in the global north, brought to you courtesy not only of the usual suspects, but also liberal, so-called critical forces in the university. In these contexts, we stay steadfast to the idea that education is the self-determined domain of peoples, and that its contemporary colonial occupation and weaponization is vast and brutal, but fragile, end quote. So, as we embark on today's screening and discussion, we ask, what ideas can we study, practice, and deepen as we continue our work of educational liberation and the rupturing of Western hegemonic epistemologies? These are the questions of the Black Fantastic. What is the Black Fantastic? Asks Echo Eschen. He states, it is not simply about spotlighting more Black faces. It is about establishing a shift in viewers' positionality and perceptions away from looking at Black figures and struggles towards looking with them, alongside them, and in turn seeing the world as they see it. The Black Fantastic, he says, is our freedom. The Black Fantastic is liberation. We welcome you to a year of education in the Black Fantastic, to the ongoing work of our freedom and our liberation. So today, I would like to introduce you all to filmmaker, scholar, and fellow colleague, Professor Marquise Mays. Marquise is an award-winning filmmaker and film professor living and working in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Experienced in a variety of film arts and practices, Marquise's films and research are careful renderings of individual and collective Black life on and off screen, specifically as it relates to the Black Midwestern experience. His work has been distributed and featured on renowned Criterion Channel, PBS, BET, Aspire TV, and the Redford Center, alongside a slew of national and international film festivals. One of his crown achievements is when he served as an associate producer on the Student Academy Award-winning film, The Dope Years, The Untold Story of Latasha Harlins. As an independent filmmaker and film studies scholar, Marquise's work and research is rooted within his Black queer experience, thus allowing his films and research to be careful and intimate renderings of individual life. He presents a range of access points for participation in dialogues, theoretical deliberations, and creative enterprises related to the projections of Black life on screen. Structured as a visual love letter, Marquise's film The Heartland explores the childhood experience for Black kids growing up in Milwaukee. From the moment when they lost their innocence to the outwardly expression that defined their voices, three Milwaukee natives recount the most vulnerable moments of their adolescent lives. Now all grown up, this film gives space to these adults to reconcile the relationship with the place that they call home. So for this talk, we will begin by watching The Heartland, then move into a facilitated discussion followed by a Q&A with those of y'all on the webinar. But before we get started, I would like to give a warm welcome to Professor Marquise Mays. Welcome, Marquise.
What's up, everyone? This is starting to feel very surreal that Cheddar is doing this for me. We were in our same McNair cohort together. So it's super, super dope to be on the other side of this world in academia and to just see the amazing work that Cheddar is doing and seeing how our worlds are still colliding is always super fun. So I'm excited to be here and like chat with y'all. Hope you all enjoyed the film.
Thank you, Marquise. Before we start, is there anything you want us to know about the Heartland or what inspired you to make it before we start the stream?
Yeah, the Heartland was birthed out of really 2020 COVID years. I moved back to Milwaukee, Wisconsin from LA, and I was just having a lot of conversations with my little cousins, and they were all really angry about Milwaukee, as if they could talk about Milwaukee as if it was a person. They all had very strong dislike and hate for the city, and I wanted to interrogate why. And as I started to think about my experience at their age, I kind of came to the realization that Milwaukee wasn't too kind to Black kids like myself growing up. And for some reason, I had like kind of suppressed that. So I wanted to interrogate what it means to grow up Black in a place like Milwaukee and what did we have to birth and create for ourselves to be able to hold space for ourselves in a place that didn't love us in the same way that we loved it. So it turned into kind of this investigation, and I was happy to get a group of people to speak so candidly about their experiences as well that kind of mirrored my own.
No, that's deep. But I'm really excited for everyone to see this film because when I first saw it, it was very much resonant with my experiences as well. So I am excited for the dialogue to come post the film screening. Okay, so without further ado, we are going to get the Heartland screened as soon as we can get that link up.
Milwaukee. On what it ain't nobody quite like you. Like us. On what it ain't nobody that talk quite like us. Southern and Chicago roots, yeah. But we done made it our own. On what? And on what it ain't nobody flies us. Cause they can rock Air Force Ones. But they ain't dookies to them. On what it ain't nobody that sound like us. That NPS beat ring off any surface in any setting. And bow in my projects forever classic. And the bass gon' bump out whoever trunk. But the ball hitting cans was the loudest beat on any street. I hope those things are forever. I hope those things never change. The Heartland. My name's Cassandra Colson. People call me Casey, and I'm from the near north side. If you walk through my neighborhood at any time, you'll see a lot of cans just in the middle of the sidewalk. You know, squares on the sidewalk. You got cans on the lines, about 2 squares from each other. And you take a ball and you try to hit the can. Yeah, I think we had to make a lot of our own fun, and cans is both probably historically like a result of that, but also it's just a really fun thing to do. You'll see anybody playing it from 8-year-olds to teenagers.
We pretty much did anything that you can do on concrete. Kickball, softball, I was pretty good at that.
I would be playing kind of either in my yard. We had for a while a small little jungle gym.
Basketball, of course. Intense games of tag.
Sometimes we just ride our bikes, which was always fun.
Yeah, our bikes were like the gateway to the city.
And outside is the most free you could probably be as a kid in Milwaukee, I think.
I'm Milwaukee's relationship with Black kids is a tense relationship, because I just think there's a lot of mistrust from Black kids about the city that doesn't seem to care as much about us. In the classroom, on the street, you just see people who don't like Black kids. And then the city is surprised when Black kids emerge angry or hurt or confused from those situations.
So, first thing, my name is Radea Ellis. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The moment in which I was radicalized, I realized colorism, racism, classism, all that shit, all at once. So my grandfather is a white man. We go to McDonald's thinking that shit cool, and we're all in line. My grandfather is behind us. He like, pick what y'all want. Just tell him at the register, and I'm gonna pay for it. So we go to the counter, we all say what we want, and then they did not believe that my grandfather was our grandfather. Like, he paying for our shit regardless of what's going on. I'm trying to eat. That experience of, like, one, not necessarily being respected when we're ordering, two, them not associating white people with Black kids, okay, and then three, really them not necessarily want to talk to us because of more so how we looking. So it wasn't just Black, it's more so like we look raggedy and Black. And then we looking like this white man saved us. It's not to say that I didn't know I was Black before that, but I didn't know what my Blackness meant before that. So, yeah, that shit, I found that shit out in McDonald's.
I think that was a big struggle. It's like, they just didn't even want us to be like Black kids. They wanted us to, like, they training you up to like this kind of like rigid white adulthood. And we were like 8.
So my name is Matthew Lewis. I am born and raised in Sherman Park, Milwaukee, specifically like the 55th and Keith area. My family belonged to a Baptist church. I was born into that church. Like, my mom was raised in that church. My granddad was a deacon. It was just like really central to our life. You just did things together. And in that church, like, you really trusted other people to kind of take care of your kids. It really was a village. When it started that, like, people could pinpoint that I was queer, and things that are cute when you're little stop being cute, and you start to have people who are like consistently correcting you. Or I remember one time in drill team, I was like doing the drill that we were doing, and one of the parents like pulled our son aside and like told him he was not to do things like me. And it just felt lonely, and I was like, why am I showing up here to feel disliked? I don't want to be here. So I want to say maybe around 8 or 9 is when it started. When I reached like 11, 12, 13, I was like, I'm ready to be out. Like, when I left that church, like, that was my home away from home. So as much as I'm about like being in spaces and helping them grow, I'm also a little wary, because what happens when that space no longer exists, or like the people no longer want you there?
Growing up in Milwaukee, you see so much happen. You know people that die. You know people whose friends die. And you hope it's not your friends. And every summer you kind of wait with bated breath and hope you get through that summer. But as kids, like, even when we knew that, I think that for a lot of us, it didn't constrain us yet. We weren't resigned to that yet. So yeah, I think a lot of my childhood memories at school was one of the first ones that I have that wasn't like kindergarten was I think we were in like maybe 3rd grade when Alexis Patterson went missing.
The hearts of Milwaukee. 7-year-old Alexis Patterson disappeared on her way to school.
She was just 7 years old when she went missing. Her stepdad walked her to school. When she crossed the street at 49th and Garfield, she was never seen again.
Well, Jake and Carol, in the last 10 years, police have not stopped working on the Alexis Patterson case. And today they unveiled some new tools in the hopes of finding her.
Today marks 15 years since little Alexis Patterson went missing near 49th and Garfield.
The 7-year-old Patterson would now be 22 years old. She was last seen walking from her home to
that really changed the way we move, I think, for the first time. Because I think when you're a kid, you're just invincible. Like, I'm gonna ride my bike with no hands down this hill. Like, I'm gonna do all this type of stuff. And you know you're gonna bounce back from whatever. And I think that's the first shock to your system was the Alexis Patterson going missing. And it was like, this isn't like TV. This isn't, this isn't a monster under the bed type of situation. This isn't, something that I read about in books. This is somebody who looks like me, hair like mine. It just changed the way you play at recess. Tag ain't as fun anymore when you got the boundaries of the playground because you scared somebody gonna grab you up over the fence. I think that was like one of the most transformative events of our childhood.
So this is the thing. When you black, you can live a completely different life from another motherfucker who identify as black, and all of a sudden your life is the same life, right? So, it's kind of fucked up, but black kids don't get to be individuals. So when you go through your trauma, you go through your trauma together. So, in all honesty, I definitely wish that we got to be individuals, right? And then we got to be kids.
Yeah, I think your parents definitely get a tighter hold on you. Outside is only as generous as the people out there. I think when your parents are scared that you're gonna get snatched up off the street, or they're scared of, that the police are one of the biggest dangers to you, they keep you a hold on you tighter. And it's something that they have to do, one, to feel comfortable and keep you safe. So they're not doing it to be malicious. They're not doing it to be one of those forces that restrict you, but they do end up being that. I wanted to play. I wanted to go run around. I wanted to ride my bike, duck down the alley, wanted to race. I wanted to be out there. It was just a lot less that we could do. As a kid, I think you know the reality of the city, but you don't think that it'll come for you. And I think that's what we had, was like this child, that's what I call it, is like this audacity to dream and to think that we could overcome it. We were not the danger, but a lot of times we got treated like the danger. By the powers that be, by the people that was really dangerous to us. We really realized that to keep other people in, they had to keep us out. You can really make a lot of fun in the mall, whether you post, whether you buying something or not. Like when we were in high school, that's when they put down the limits of who could come in. You had to have a wristband, or you had to have somebody over 21. But it wasn't just Mayfair. It would be restaurants and stuff. It's damn, we're not even entitled to a meal. So yeah, they would turn out lights at the park, or they would lock gate up stuff. Even basketball games and stuff, you can't have a phone. You gotta get your ticket however many days in advance. You gotta sit here. You gotta do that. But even something that's should be so accessible, where all you need is a ball and something that's like a hoop. But even stuff like that, they took from us. They take those things down. They didn't let us go to high school games. They, didn't let us do a lot of that stuff.
In some ways, I do feel like my discovery of self was limited. For a long while, it didn't feel, especially as a young person, that there was any visible queer community to attach to learn more about that part of myself. And I don't know that that is so much the fault of queer Milwaukee as it is just the way Milwaukee is set up as a city. I don't know that it's easy, if you live in one part of town, to find a resource that is located somewhere else.
The city's so segregated. There's a lot of different Milwaukees depending on what side you live in.
You can see the switch, you can smell the switch, you can feel the switch. You can feel essentially that trauma connected to people's homes being broken up, blocks being cut in half, because that's what's happening. So you literally pass through the trauma to a better life, if you will.
So if that meant driving from the north side to Incredible on the far south side, we were gonna do that because no one was trying to police the behavior of Black kids. They were playing good music, and we picked each other up, arranged rides to make sure everybody who wanted to go could go, and we did that. So I think for me, it was just finding a group of friends who weren't afraid to go Like, this is our Milwaukee too. If we want to go do something, we're gonna go do it. We're gonna show up and we're gonna be there.
Dancing was like a huge thing. Like, yeah, there were ciphers and stuff like that, like when people would rap, but it was like times where we would just all be like huddled around in a circle, and there'd be people in the middle just banging and twanging.
Twanging and banging came out in what was that? Like 2010, 09, 2010? And it's basically a beatboxing just because of the A, and then they damn near like make the beat on their own when you dancing and shit. But outside of that, more so breakdancing, and it's African roots to it. So shout out to that. Yeah, it's more than a workout. You do not do that. You do not twang or bang without stretching. Banging was important at that time for the simple fact of what was stated. We didn't have nothing else to do. So banging literally brought all the hoods in one place. Every time. That's why it was cracking. You literally seen what they doing over there on the south side. And you didn't even know black people stayed on the south side till it was a dance war. It's like, hey, where you from? Oh, I say I'm Oklahoma. What the fuck? Where the fuck Oklahoma at? Now you know it's Oklahoma and Milwaukee. Great. You know, and then to the same thing about the dances. Like, people thinking they making up these own dances on their own. You got dances coming out from the woodwork, just people just doing stuff, and not the whole city doing your dance. I fuck with banging. I do. I thoroughly fuck with banging because that's clearly something we made on our own without like inspiration outside of the hood. So that's always supported. Yeah, it was just a place in which like our people trusted, so you already feel like that. You got to get fly. You had to get fly, actually. If you weren't fly, somebody was going to remember. So, yeah, it brought out the culture. It brought the city out. It brought the money out. You got to see, like, that's when trend setting became a thing. Like, I'm finna do some new shit because it's another dance horse, and somebody gonna see me.
It's nobody that dressed like us in the way that we dress. And I don't say that to be I'm not saying, you know, as unique as you think something is, you go somewhere else and you see the same. But me and somebody from New York could be wearing the same outfit, head to toe, everything. It's gonna be different because they wearing Uptowns and I'm wearing Dookies. You really had transitions from like being like a baby type to being like your own type of kid. Like, you had really made it when you got your first pair of Dookies, which Nike Air Force Ones, we call them Dookies. Once you got your first pair, you had to keep them clean.
Like, the respect you even have for the city is because you like banging. Like, if you don't know banging, you probably don't like the city. Like, they are correlated. That's how influential it was to the city. A lot of breakout artists used to bang, used to dance. Whether they do photography, they rappers, videographers, whatever art form they do now, they were inspired by banging.
When you demand the space from a city that I think has consistently tried to shut down spaces of expression for Black kids, and Black kids like have persisted despite all that, I love it. I love all of the creatives in this city. I love all of the new youth activists like making their voices known. I just think that is the amazing part of like growing up in Milwaukee. Is I do think despite the restriction here, there's a certain voice that Milwaukee Black kids have, and like when you hear it, you know that that's a Milwaukee Black kid.
On what? On what is a term that you would use when you're trying to signify agreement. When you're trying to clarify a question, you would interject the phrase on what? Or like clarification, questioning, or agreement. So question, clarification, or agreement, you use on what? An example of on what used in a sentence is, it's raining outside. On what is raining? Like, you're questioning it's raining, as if you haven't been outside all day to know that it's raining, or you haven't checked the weather to clarify or confirm that it's raining. You would interject with the phrase on what?
Because sometimes it's kind of blunt, it's to the point, and you can kind of pick up like where they're from in this city that has shaped that voice. And I just think I celebrate that about Black kids from Milwaukee.
greatest goal that a Milwaukee kid could have was to leave Milwaukee.
I think there is a mixed bag of expectations of what it means to be a Black person living in Milwaukee. I think one of those expectations that I always quarreled with is this idea that, like, you grow up in Milwaukee, but you leave here.
Like, that was our idea of making it out of kind of the boxes we had been put in, was to leave entirely.
That always bothered me because, one, like, I should be able to succeed in my home. I should be able to be successful in the place I grew up. But two, like, what does that mean for the next group of Black kids growing up? Is it just, like, to grow up enough to run out of here?
But I think that we can build something here. I think that we have such a shared experience here. We experience so many of the same things that we gotta pay that forward. We gotta draw that line from what things were.
I have to have hope in Milwaukee because so many people I love live here, and I have to have hope that they'll be able to thrive here. And because I know so many beautiful people living here who are change makers, who are talented, who are innovative in their ideas.
I'm just hoping for liberation, for all, but especially for us, because we deserve so much better. We have created something here that I think is beautiful and amazing. I think that we deserve so much more than what we currently get. Like, we love this city so much, and it's time for it to really love us back.
I have to believe that as long as they are here, like, there's always a chance for Milwaukee to improve and get better.
I hope for summers that are a time of celebration. I hope that the audacity that we had as children, that the kids now, that they'll be able to have that as adults, and they'll be able to build something that even my current imagination could not see. I hope it's something radical. I hope it's something beautiful. I just hope to see happy summers. I hope to see kids that both metaphorically and literally are not kept out of anywhere. I hope that there's a pride that we have to know that this is our city. Like, people can hit us with the percentages, they can do this, they can do that, but this is our city. Like, the culture here, we make that. People see it as like beer and cheese, blah, 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 but who works in the breweries? Who works in them factories? You know, who have worked in these streets for so long and tried so hard, you know, to build something that it might not be something that outsiders come and tour, but it's something that the people here, where we can really have lives. We can really just be. And I think it's just a power in just being able to just be. Milwaukee summers are so hot, I fear anytime my phone rings. Too much bad news, too many close calls. Even my fondest memories are stained with regret that so many things aren't different the way we intended them to be, the way we dreamed they would be. And I changed on you too. Left, and I lost everything. Wasted what my village sacrificed to get me out of here for. But I came back, hat in hand, loving you more than ever, and not knowing how to show it. I hope going forward we can change together. Cause it ain't no me without you. And even though one day I'll die, hopefully in this city, the things I've touched will forever be better for it. I hope when we change together, that we bust down all the doors that they kept us out of. And I know that there's some things that I can never get back. You really took some things from me. But the things you took, you gave me in the first place. And for that, it's no way to pay you back, and I'm forever indebted. But I'm still gonna work to pay it off. And if you ask me to, I'm gonna pay it off. The Heartland.
I wrote like 4 more bars just to see what's good. it all down like I'm planning. Follow through like it's commandments, nigga. I'm out here taking advantage. Home with it bad like a bandit, nigga. I know these niggas can't. Wait, I know these niggas can't stand it, yeah. My niggas grew up on Hampton, ayy. This shit don't look like the Hamptons, nigga, ayy. Keep the Sprite clean, I don't do the lean, I don't do the Zan. I grew up with fiends, pockets full of grams in the joint. Exhale the air, can't you feel the steam? Smoke, feel the air. Heaven when I breathe, lights from the flare. I see niggas bleed, eating strange fruit, blood on the leaves. Ain't nobody give me love when I need ya. I grew up heartless, I know niggas who ain't left their apartment. I feel like Bane when I'm trapped in the darkness. The hardest of artists and I'm still a target. You niggas can't off me, I'm killing them softly. So proceed with caution, my proceeds are awesome. I'm flawless, magnificent, fuck it, you niggas done lost me.
Coming through commas, I'ma make it, I put that on my mama, ready for the drama. Do it for that money and I need the honor. Why these niggas steady switching sides? I'ma change the world, I put that on my life.
Follow through like it's commandments, nigga. I'm out here taking advantage. Home with it bad like a bandit, nigga. Write it all down like I'm planning. Follow through like it's commandments, nigga. I'm out here taking advantage. Home with it bad like a bandit, nigga.
And I can't stop putting pressure on the next to who next up. Just fast up the extras, dress my neck up. Nothing casual about how I do. Ask around, they tell you how I move. Know that they using my name for a discount, but that's a purchase that I did not approve. They trying to step in my shoes, but ain't creasing.
This is like the third time I've seen this film, and every single time I'm just like, there's a gem that I leave with. So I hope everybody on the talk also is leaving with some gems, but also with some questions. So as we start our facilitated talk, just please have any questions and feed them through the Q&A function on the chat. Where should we start, Marquise?
I have no idea. To you.
Okay, I have a few things in mind. Let's reframe and let's anchor in the Black Fantastic. So, Echo Eshun, he describes the Black Fantastic as not a place of escape or retreat from reality, but an assertion of space, being and dreaming in the world. So while I was watching the film, I recognized this assertion of space through the persistence of Black kids creating their own spaces through language, fashion, and dance to demand to be seen on their own terms. So my first question for you is, can you speak to how dance, specifically banging and twanging, operate or within or as the Black Fantastic?
Yeah, one, I really, really love this idea of the Black Fantastic because it could mean so many things. And I really do think that what we do as Black people is very otherworldly at times. Banging and twanging specifically, I think the reason why I wanted to highlight banging and twanging is because a lot of my work subtly talks about the Black Midwest as a place, as a concept. I guess I haven't made work that has been very like critical about the Black Midwestern experience as far as like this is who we are as a Black Midwestern person. But what I can say is that a dance like banging and twanging comes from so many different places, so many different regions, right? It comes from Louisiana, it comes from Oakland, it comes from Chicago, it comes from Detroit, but then it all kind of stumbles into this gumbo that is Milwaukee. And I think that is fantastic about who we are as Milwaukeeans, who we are as the Black Midwest, as really charting who we are. And we're kind of all mixing together these Black cultural like expressions that turn into something like banging and twanging, which now has become, since 2020, like Milwaukee kind of runs TikTok, right? Like there's so many different dance expressions that have transitioned from our physical spaces here to digital spaces, that I think people are starting to see Milwaukee as a comparable Black place for Black expression, like they would see a Jersey, like they would see a Detroit, like they would see in Atlanta. And I think the fantastic part about it is we necessarily didn't need exposure. We were fine with it with ourselves. But yeah, it's fantastic. The movement, how they do it, how they like are able. I still to this day only have practiced in my room banging and swinging. No one has ever seen me do it. because it is something that feels innate. And Radea said it perfectly, like there's African roots to what it is, and it's interesting to see how we call back to it. It almost feels like Afrofuturist in the movement within itself. So it's super cool to see how the kids are evolving with it outside what we used to do back in the day.
No, definitely. I mean, to speak to that, I mean, I also was not banging and swinging. I was the one keeping the beat because it is a
Gotta keep
very
the beat.
yeah, it's a very communal type of deal where it's just like if you can't do the dance, you keep the beat. So nobody is excluded from the circles or the ciphers, as you referred to in the film.
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah. So let's also get into Milwaukee slang. I heard a lot of terms like dookies, but specifically on what, which is a phrase with multiple meanings and uses that is emblematic of Milwaukee. It allowed us to find each other amidst the city's insistence to kind of see us fragmented and segregated. How do you see language, specifically our slang as Black Milwaukeeans, as an assertion of space?
And the funny thing is, I think even this film, although it came out in 2020, feels a bit dated to what the kids are saying now. Because I have no, I am like all over the place with what Black kids in the city are saying now. But language is key. I just think it's just about really rooting ourselves in this place. I think it's tough being a Black kid when you leave Milwaukee and you see these regional places of Black expression and they have these things that they feel are identifiable to like a global or national scale, right? We know what a New Yorker sounds like. We know what an Atlantean sounds like. We know what someone from Compton sounds like. And I think Black kids in this city have never been able to really claim our language or claim our style without it also being met with violence, from school systems to police to segregation. So I think a lot of folks that leave the city end up trying to forget these parts of themselves so intimately and so quickly. And it's always interesting to me. People say people from Milwaukee are easily adaptable in any other place because we tend to mold into whatever identity of the city that we're in. So my goal is within what we do is to really say, no, like we are the legacy of this great migration. And although it is difficult and although it is violent at times, there are ways for us to preserve this language. So I was happy to like honor on what in a way, because it is something that if you know, you know. If you feel it, you feel it. And even again, Radea was so good at giving us the different inflections of how you say it. So language is key. So I think I was doing it just to kind of, again, affirm to Black Milwaukeeans that we have something to hold on to. We have a world of our own, and we don't have to necessarily chase for other worlds just because the world we're in doesn't seem to love us in the way that we love it. Like there can still be some relationship there regardless.
Definitely. Yeah, because I noticed like even when I left Milwaukee, there were certain terms or like, slang phrases that just never left me. Like even when I came to the University of Pittsburgh, I still call Air Force Ones dookies. And
Right.
like having to explain that and explain the history around that is just like interesting because, there's certain terms that regardless, like you said, New York, they call them uptowns. You don't really
Yeah.
have to explain that because there is a knowing, right? But I do think what I'm getting from you is just like that assertion of space where it's just like we're not going to alter what we're saying. This is us,
Yeah.
and y'all have to deal with it. And eventually that becomes the new addition to Black life and Black
Yeah,
knowledge.
for sure. And I think one thing too to add is I think we're in an age. We all know that Blackness is not a monolith. I think that is something we've like said all the time. But I think we're in an age now where we are just these regional experiences of Blackness have really like allowed us to understand Black American culture, because there's also this conversation that is happening globally, especially from the UK. I've been studying a lot about Black British folk and how they see to look at America or Black Americans as not having a subsequent universal culture.
Mhm.
And I think it's really beautiful that we're able to like complicate that kind of questioning and say, yeah, we actually our culture isn't universal. Like someone from
Yes.
New York is not someone like from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and that is beautiful and that is okay in its own right, although we hold the same racial relationship, right? So I do think it's a point to say, like, I'm not necessarily trying to pinpoint Milwaukee on the map and be like, hey, there's Black people here. It's more so for Black Milwaukeeans to say, we've been here. Let's continue to cultivate this language, cultivate this world that we exist in, and find ways to allow our children to embrace it too, and not feel like they have to distort or contort themselves into some other form of Black identity that they deem as maybe in the zeitgeist of popular culture at the moment that is like taking their attention away, because it's very easy for algorithms to do that too, So yeah.
Definitely. Thinking about like Black children in Milwaukee and youth, going back to Eshin, he envisions the Black Fantastic as a space that does not avoid or deny what is frightening, harsh, or painful about anti-Blackness and living in an anti-Black world, while also operating as a space of presence, optimism, hope, and dreaming. So as I was watching the film, I noticed this constant like push and pull between the outside being a space of freedom for Black children in Milwaukee, but then the violent reaction to Black freedom in the form of anti-Black policy and structures that the geopolitical force that is Milwaukee would react to this. Specifically, I saw how the narrators they reference tragic events like the abduction of Alexis Patterson or the deaths of friends in the summertime. Specifically, I saw how Casey was talking about how summers are a very bittersweet, intense season because of this uncertainty of Black life in Milwaukee, but yet you show us cans in the beginning of the film, which is a game that's associated with summer and signifies summer for a lot of us growing up in Milwaukee and the freedom that's associated with outside. So in a roundabout way, I'm asking, how can you help us make sense of this ongoing tension, and why did you choose to portray it like this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. You know what's so funny? I always ask my great grandmother every time. I'm like, girl, why did you choose Milwaukee? You come from the South. You came from Batesville, Mississippi, where it's hot all year round, and then you chose to come to a place like Milwaukee where it's snow and all this weather. To explain the tension really between summer, whatever summer may mean for the Black person in Milwaukee, is we are kind of locked in the house for 9 months. Right? 9 to 10 months, we are locked in the house due to snow, right? Due to inclement weather. Now that doesn't stop a lot of people, but for the most of us, we're locked in the house for 10 months, right? So the 2 to 3 months that we get, we take full advantage. And with that comes, due to segregation, due to the history and the system of redlining, due to the system of like proximity to violence specifically, all those things do take place and they do exist. And they exist in a way, in an odd way, very rapidly in Milwaukee because of the fact that people are getting active, right? Specifically getting active during that time. And it's a yearning. And I think the best way to describe it is people are yearning for something. And I think being in the house for, majority of your year, and then the summer comes, you are yearning for a lot of things. And I always love to say that I never root, because obviously a lot of the violence that takes place in our city is due to lack of resource. So people are yearning for things. They're yearning for resources. People are yearning for love. They're yearning for social interaction. They're yearning for expression. And that's where it comes from. I think the one interesting thing about cans that we talk about often is, people think of Milwaukee, specifically like climate activists, they think of Milwaukee as this place that, because we're right next to we're right next to a fresh lake, right? There's this kind of interesting thing that is happening where a lot of these white folk are moving to our city, buying property up like crazy because of climate change. And I like to think Black kids are some of the first climate activists in our city because they are taking recycled items, playing with them, and then continuing to recycle them. Like there's this really cool relationship between like us finding cans on the floor or on the street, picking the cans up, having a little fun with the cans, and then throwing them away. Like that was always a part of the ritual of cans. Like you play with them and then you throw them away, right? You put them in a recycling bin. So like those type of aspects of ourselves is something that I really wanted to talk about because it really speaks about our streets, right? Like the north side is filled with trash. You know what I mean? And I think it's interesting to see these Black kids repurpose, even myself, like repurpose this trash to have fun with it and then also discard of it. And I wanted to make sure that even in a subtle way that Black kids are always in the forefront of like climate activism because they're doing their part as well. Especially in a place like the Midwest. So I don't know if I answered it like correctly, but the summer is always is a source of tension, but it's a lot of yearning that is happening in the city, and I think people are finding various ways to kind of satisfy that yearning that they're seeking.
No, definitely. From what you were saying, like what I got was like this knowledge that Black children have that is often overlooked or unthought of as knowledge, where it's just like the fact of the matter is what you said is valid. Like Black children are climate activists with the sense that they understand that they can reduce, reuse, and recycle and, create a fun game out of it, like, and the fact that we don't view that as conservation, I think is a very narrow understanding of the epistemological traditions that Black people in Milwaukee have had, where it's just like, in a way,
Right.
cans is a way to make $1 out of 15 cents,
Mm.
And I think what you speak to, that yearning and that love of outside after being cooped up in the house, I think is very resonant of my experience living in Milwaukee as well. But then also I wonder, like, when Alexis Patterson was abducted, like that response not only from the state, but then also like from parents, where it's just like I think Casey kind of talked about it, where the parents weren't intentionally trying to repress our freedom, but they had to do that in service of the geopolitical force that is Milwaukee, where I want to keep my child safe because if I can't, the geopolitical force known as Milwaukee will harm my child because this freedom is something that the city doesn't want to have unchecked. And that's kind of what I was getting from the film. So can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, for sure. I think it is a really complicated it's a really complicated relationship that not only Black kids have with the city, but with their parents. And the promises that the Midwest offered to a lot of our parents, right? I think I look at someone like my father who didn't go to college. And when he when he was a young adult around my age, there was these huge industrial jobs that existed for Black people to make money and to support their family. But the thing that they don't mention is a lot of those folks, a lot of those men ended up disabled. My dad had developed macular degeneration in his eyes, and
Mm,
he injured his back, which disabled him from doing so many things because of how laborious the job was,
mm,
right? So that is something that is then transferred to child, right? As
yes.
child, you see a city who worked your parents to the bone. And
Mhm,
and because of that, your parents not only are trying to survive, they're trying to make sure that you become something, right?
mm,
Or that you get out of the city in some way. It's this
mm,
really interesting relationship with it that I've been sitting with for some time as I think about like the promises of the Great Migration and what was passed to the descendants, what was really passed to us as children by way of these promises. And yeah, you're right. Like I think when Alexis Patterson, when that happened, and I'm a year younger than Alexis, so
mm,
when it happened, that was a really tough conversation to have in 2002.
yeah.
I was a kid, and I had this contention in my body that was like, well, I can't go to the park by myself. And I remember one time it was here's a quick story. I was learning how to ride a bike, and my mom and my dad would walk behind me while I rode the bike. There was one time, me being a Black kid, being wanting to be free, I kind of just rode around the park.
Mm,
Just as like because I finally got it and I figured it out. And I was met returning to my parents, I was met with anger. And the
mm,
anger wasn't like I'm mad at you. It was a fear of like,
yes.
you can't do that. And I always was just very taken aback by that because I was just like this moment where I've achieved this thing that every kid is happy to achieve is learning how to ride a bike. Mine was met with a fear of some sort. So to understand that your childhood is always going to be met with this kind of, oh, we're going to pull the rug up under you at some point, that you grow up with that type of feeling, and it makes it really complicated to even feel comfortable to do things. You know, I don't even know how to swim because when I was younger, there were two Black boys that drowned.
Yes.
By playing in a nearby lake. And the way that the city treated those Black boys, not really giving excuse my language, a damn about whether those boys were found. I think our parents knew that when it came to emergencies, when it came to needing help from the city, or from what is supposed to help us, like state sanctioned police officers, that they wouldn't get any help anyways, and it would be on them. So they not only became the parent, they became the enforcer in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of us are trying to repair that now too. Like,
definitely.
Yeah.
Because when you bring up the fact that you don't know how to swim, I didn't learn how to swim either because, both of us being MPS alum, I remember in my middle school, right? It was over the summer. One of my classmates drowned. And then I think in response, the district said, y'all can't go to the pool or any type of like water related field trips, right? And I think before then, we would always go to like the Dale. So like the fact that this was something that we had as like a milestone of like celebrating, achievements. And then it was taken from us because of the fact that, a Black kid lost their lives, and then we have to be punished, I think speaks to like that tension between the freedom that outside represents and then the way the state responds to us being too free.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really complicated relationship because I do think that it created this resentment, and it also created this desensitization. Like we just became very desensitized to these things, right? Like I think after those two young Black boys, I think every situation that happened afterwards, we were all just like, here's another thing, right? And here's another thing that is barring us from living. And it's unfortunate that Black kids have to reconcile that type of relationship with folks that have lost their lives. I think Radea speaks about it very clearly when she says, when one Black person goes through some type of trauma, it becomes all of ours. And I hate that. I really do hate that as Black kids, they're harboring this resentment toward other Black kids who are going through traumatic things. And that's just the way the system works, right? The system is meant to embed and indoctrinate us to also be anti-Black toward our people, to consider all these other things. And I think in the unlearning of that is I think where a lot of us are right now, like unlearning the ways in which we become carceral to our own people, the people that are next to us, the children next to us. And it's really interesting to see how the city played and did that. Because even I think when it came down to like Alexis Patterson, like I think the city's response was always just like almost feeling like it was her fault, right?
Yeah.
They're just like, they always blamed it on her. They always blamed it on those two boys. And it was just like, well, like, again, there are so many other people, so many other things systematically that can be blamed, but for some reason it is so simple and easy to blame a child. So yeah, it's something that I'm really trying to reconcile with. And the Heartland still to this day, I try to sit with it. Because it is definitely, the work is not done. So it's definitely something I'm like always considering in my work.
But I think the work is timeless, where I feel like 5 years from now, we could show the same film and we'll have the same conversation. So I do think is an impressive work, because some of the messages, specifically like the idea of leaving in order to make it, it resonated deeply with me because that was something that was always told to me as a child. Like, if you want to make it, you got to leave and you got to never come back, visit on the holidays, see your family, but you can't, buy a house there, right? But yet you and a lot of other people in the film, they returned or they stayed in the city. And to me, I felt like that ruptured a lot of the stuff that we were told as kids on what it meant to make it. So in what ways does the Heartland create space for dreaming and world making for those people who choose to return or people who choose to stay?
Yeah, I think I think it works in a variety of ways. I think if I had to give like a film answer, like I didn't grow up with a Black filmmaker that existed in my world that was from my city. The thing is, there are Black people from Milwaukee that are responsible for some of the best cult classic Black films ever. Soul Food, he's from Milwaukee. He went to my high school, right? Like George Tillman, like he went to my high school. He also did The Hate You Give. Like that is key information that I wonder if a young Marquise who was interested in film, if he would have known that, if something would have shifted or swayed. There are so many people who are from this great city who choose to leave because one, Milwaukee isn't offering them, hasn't. The arts area in Milwaukee also, I think, is filled with well-intentioned white folk who don't really want to engage with the north side of the city or the south side of the city, but they want us to come to the east side, right? They want us to integrate into their worlds, but they don't want to do the outwardly work of integrating with ours. So when you're having that constant back and forth, of course you're gonna leave. Of course you're gonna like try to find a place where you can express yourself, and get love right back. So yeah, it is something that I'm noticing. A lot of folks are moving back to the city, and it's beautiful right now. I think there's so many representation, and I know representation is a fickle thing sometimes because it's just like image is an image. But I do think the difference this time is that there's an investment into Black narrative, Black story, Black imagination. You know, I'm a documentary filmmaker. I'm one of few in the city. But there are people who are making horror films, right? Like there's literally someone making a short horror film right now. They're from Milwaukee and they're doing it based on Sherman Park, which is a popular Black park or a popular park in a Black neighborhood that I'm not too far from, right? Like there are people here who want to do horror, who want to learn prosthetics, who want to try poetry film. Like there's so many people who are doing it. Like my friends are doing art galleries now. Like that's super cool. And children, whether they are forced by their parents or not to come to this stuff, like they are seeing it and they know that it's possible. In terms of like people, period, yeah, I think the city has every Black person has a right to be upset with Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to be very honest. And they have every right to never want to return here. But that's not going to stop from Black kids being born here. So I think always reminding myself that like I have a responsibility, like, and I have a responsibility to challenge the industries in which I work in too, to not have to tell kids that they have to go to an LA to make a movie or they have to go to New York and make a movie. No, you can make one right here. Like it's very simple to make one right here. It's more community focused. So it's teaching them how to be community members as opposed to an individual artist, right? No, you have to be a community member to then be an artist, right? Like how do you mend those worlds together as opposed to having a silo? So yeah, I think that's what's happening in the city, and it's intriguing to investigate right now from all the different perspectives.
Definitely. Yeah. So as we were talking, I noticed in the chat a lot of folks have like, questions and things that aligned and resonated with them as we were talking about our previous question about, outside and the tensions and then the ways in which parents are essentially they're weaponized to become the forces that oppress Black children and freedom. I see in the chat, Shalegra told us, this reminds me of a theme of parenting work proposed by Dr. Shirley Hill, where Black families were overcorrect and undercorrect in response to the imposed societal harms to Black children. You want to say anything about that? Because that makes me think of like when Casey was saying, they wanted this rigid white
Adulthood. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think that's just the world that Gen X grew up with. And that's the world that the baby boomers grew up with. I think, which is crazy because I don't know. I think a lot of the desire for us to grow up and live kind of like a rigid white adulthood was due to, again, fear, right? I think our parents and our grandparents knew how easy it could be to fall victim to these systems, right? And I just, it's really, really tough to answer that question because it really just depends on household, right? Like, for example, like I didn't grow up in my household, we weren't reading revolutionaries. There was the Bible, right? And I think, and that's no fault of my parents that they didn't engage with revolutionary text, with radical text, with Black feminist text, right? I'm not blaming them for that. But when you are raised under a certain understanding of Black life, where it is only relegated to a religious text that is interpreted over and over again, I think that definitely can skew your ideas or perceptions of what is good and what is wrong, what is bad and what is good. And that simple binary is so complicated for Black children to sit with, because nothing about our lives are just like this binary. It's a very big spectrum. And I think a religious text like the Baptist Bible doesn't allow that like expansiveness or the fantastic like ideas that could exist in our bodies. And it really does take the person then, like it was hard for me to start reading revolutionary radical Black feminist texts. It was because I didn't have the patience. My gosh, like I was like always waiting for it to make sense to me. It takes me forever to read a book. That's why I make movies, but it takes me forever to read a book. So I would grow impatient because I was yearning for something in the text, yearning for an understanding of why things the way that they were, and understanding that stuff is slow for a reason. You have to sit with it. These are people experiences, right? Like that I can't gloss over. So it's really tough. I think it's definitely some generational differences. And if you were raised with that work, it is easier for you to come into that work. But if you weren't raised with that and you were raised with a certain point of view centered around a religious text, that can definitely skew your relationship to kind of identity in a lot of ways, which I'm realizing now too. It's really tough. And that's something that I've like forgiven myself for, that I didn't grow up with that, right? Where I'm just like, well, I have all the time in the world now to do it, you know? So, yeah.
Exactly. And it's just like ultimately our parents know what they know. And I think that's what Shalegra was speaking to in the
Yeah.
overcorrect and undercorrect in response to the way the state responds to us, right? Where it's just like no matter what parents do, it's just like there's still going to be this blame that's held within Black flesh, right? But
Yeah.
blame is like, in response to us being free and then the state violently saying, y'all ain't gonna do that. And then I think what makes it even worse is just like they'll say, well, it's your fault that you're in that situation. And it's
Right.
not having anything to do with the limits or the barriers or the structures that we've placed upon y'all to be unfree in the first place.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
tough.
definitely.
And that's why I'm just like, it's always the system. Like it's interesting hearing conversations about what is happening in our city and what people are going through, because I'm just like, y'all, this is all just systematic. This is all unfortunately working in the way that it is supposed to work. And the moment we stop blaming each other for the outcome and look more broadly, because that's the thing too that I've witnessed, especially with like K through 12, is like there's such a harping on like teachers getting on parents for not being involved. Where I'm just like, so wait, what was the parents' relationship to school? Like, how was their relationship to school? Do they even trust a public school? Or do they district? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think I always am thinking so critically about like, well, what if, like what happened beforehand that could lead to this situation before there is this like teacher versus parent debate, right? It should be teachers and parents versus the system and figuring out ways to repair it. But yeah, it's tough.
No, definitely. Um, I'm looking at the chat, and I think this is a question I want to hold because it's a very big Q question. But I'm definitely going to get to it. There was one more thing, a few things I wanted to ask you, specifically because as we've been talking, there's this theme of love and yearning for love that you talk about in the children's experiences growing up in Milwaukee. And the way that this film was structured, you said it was structured as a love letter, right? But we also see how this love is unrequited, but it's not extinguished from the lives of your narrators. But yet it's a driving force throughout the entirety of the film. But it's complicated, it's messy. But yet I want to know, why was this concept of a love letter important for you to show us how Black life in Milwaukee is, and how do the idea of love letters allow us to make sense of Black ways of knowing and being in response to the geopolitical force that Milwaukee responds to our freedom, if that makes sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's a good question. Um, Love letters tell the truth. And I think truth may not be something that is always like palatable or pleasant for us to hear. And I think that is why we structured it as if Black person talking to Milwaukee as person. What would you say to it? Because I think one thing I love about love letters specifically is the fact that telling the truth is love. It's a form of love. You respect the person enough, you you love the person enough to tell them the truth in a way, whether that's platonic or romantic. And I think it was so true to what so many people went through here. They respect Milwaukee so much for what it is. They love Milwaukee so much for what it is that they're willing to tell Milwaukee the truth. They're willing to tell Milwaukee that you have failed us in so many ways. And in that accountability, right? Love is also about accountability, right? So in that love letter, in that accountability, like, we are also asking or wanting or yearning for you to be better. Not just for us, because we already had our experience. Be better for who comes after us. Be better for the person after us, right? And I think that's why we structured it like that. It was just an exercise that we did with our participants. Because one thing I'm really interested in doing with documentary or film period is doing an experiment almost, right? So I love to in my films, like, have our participants do something, whether it's letter writing or drawing or sketching or coloring or whatever it may be. We love to do an experiment with the film to then figure out, like, how do we embed that experiment in the film. And Casey, we had each person write a letter, but we think Casey spoke critically to what we were trying to get at with film. And this is where I think I'm excited to be in education with film, because a lot of people see film as merely entertainment, or merely about just sitting in and talking about something. No, like, film could be used as a tool to experiment with a geopolitical topic, or something where it could be used as a tool to experiment with our concepts of identity and manhood, masculinity, femininity, like whatever it is, we can use film as a tool to express it, because film is merely an experiment, right? I'm actually working on this film right now about my father, and it's like a film about, him being in his 60s as a Black man, admitting that he's depressed. And it could be simple. I could have just sat him down and did an interview, but instead I said, you know what? You are a big man who loves home improvement. Let's do a home improvement project. Let's have you in a room doing some home improvement, talking about your life, and let's see what comes from it, right? That, like, film has the ability to give an experiment to someone, and have to figure it out, because when they edit it, when they mold it together, that is when it gets tough. That is when it gets hard, when you're trying to communicate an idea. So I'm always open to having those experiments. So it was super dope that the love letter fits so well within the context of the Heartland specifically.
Definitely, because I noticed within the love letter there was a semblance of interiority, but it was a collective as well, where it's just like, although this is very personal and interior, where I can get a glimpse of the narrators' lives and their experiences, it was also resonant, where it's just like, this isn't just for you, even though a love letter is something that's supposed to be personal, right?
Yeah.
But it was something where if somebody else read it, there's no shame in reading it, because, like you said, love is telling people the truth, right? And when I was reading, I was like, okay, I know this is personal, but like, this also has an effect on people it might not be as personal to. And I feel like folks who are in the session also kind of resonated with the messages and the themes in the film. Yeah, I
For
guess
sure.
my final question, kind of trying to segue before we get into more of the Q&A, is Eshin speaks to the importance of privileging the Black gaze, and I feel like you did that very well in the film. Specifically, The Black Fantastic is about establishing a shift in the positionality of the viewer, away from looking at Black figures towards looking with them and alongside them and turning the world as they see it. So for me, I was curious about why was it important for you as a filmmaker to show Milwaukee in the way that you did? Because I noticed there was an intentional focus away from the famous Milwaukee landmarks such as downtown, the Fiserv Forum, the Bronze Fonz, like all things that are emblematic of Milwaukee, but not Black Milwaukee. But I'm also curious about how does it rupture what we're supposed to know about the city, and what can we learn from the Heartland about depicting Black life on our own terms?
Yeah, yeah. I think the answer to the first question is simply I didn't want no white people in my movie. And it wasn't even like I wasn't trying to have them. It was simply that was not the world that I was raised in. I grew up in a very Black neighborhood. We would even find it often odd to see a white person in my neighborhood because we knew that the segregation lines are so clear, they're so firm, you know. And I wanted to make a film that was emblematic of what I was raised around, right? My elementary school was 98% Black, you know. My high school was like 90% Black. So I wanted to be truthful in doing that. And to be very honest, I think more filmmakers need to understand that if you don't know the world, there's no way for you to be able to show it accurately. I don't know. I didn't grow up knowing downtown. I didn't grow up knowing the Third Ward. I didn't grow up knowing the Pfizer Forum. Well, now the Pfizer Forum. I didn't grow up knowing those areas so intimately as I did the Sherman Park area or Third and Keith and like all the areas that I kind of went back to. So I would tell an interesting story that I think it's really important as Black filmmakers to just I'm really into like portraitures of people. So as you can see, I filmed a lot of people because Milwaukee's in a place right now where we're becoming very popular. We just hosted the Republican National Convention. We're supposed to have the Democratic National Convention in 2020. The Bucks are a very popular basketball team. And there's a lot of tourism that is happening in the city right now. People are looking at Milwaukee as like this place to visit. But they only stay in the radius of downtown or the east side. They never leave to go to the south side where the Latinx community is, and they never even consider going to the north side where the Black people are, right? I wanted to do something where I knew it felt familiar. Like I wanted to show the Black water boys who are gonna pass you a water, right? They may hop right in front of your car to do so, but they're gonna pass you a water. I wanted to show like the makeshift basketball court that these kids are making in the middle of the street, that when cars are driving past, they gotta stop for a second to go back. I wanted to show the kids playing cans. I wanted to show the kids being at a jungle gym acting a fool, right? Like I wanted to show those parts of myself that I knew I grew up with. And it's so important that we continue to do that because if not, then we are asking to be erased. We're asking to not be included in the space. We're asking to not be included in the fabric of this city. It's really interesting when people do the Milwaukee thing because we've been on TV recently. We're on Top Chef a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago, and then we also were on like the Real Housewives like franchise. So it's really interesting. They do these drone shots of the lake and of the art museum and like all the things downtown. And it always feels just cold, just very cold, nothing warm. I don't feel warmness when I look at that stuff. I don't feel warm. So I wanted to provide some warmness to who we are as people and understand who we are. So I think the Black gaze specifically is so important. And it's really just emblematic of like what I was raised on and who I was raised around. And that's what I always continue to do. Just consider who was I raised with and who deserves to be seen in that way. That's always the goal.
And like as you were explaining, it's just like I also thought about the ways that you depict Milwaukee in a way that's familiar to you, but I never felt as I was watching the movie it was asking to be included in the grander narrative. It's just like this is here, and if you choose to take it, take it. But if you choose to leave it, we're still here, and yet we're living on our own terms. And I feel like that is what Eshon is speaking to in the Black Fantastic, where it's just like it's that assertion of space
Yeah.
and that geopolitical force. It's going to respond, whether it's a violent response in the sense of state-sanctioned forces, or a more subtle response in the sense of like cultural appropriation. Because like you said, we're on the map, like we're on TikTok and people are doing a whole bunch of dances from Milwaukee, but then there is no engagement with where's it coming from, who are the people that live there. But I think that is unfortunately the arc of Black culture and Black life in an anti-Black world.
And it's so funny because you're right, 100%. Like, I thought about it the other week where I was just like, all the adults that live in the city right now were the same kids that were repressed to do nothing. We couldn't do anything in the city. Now we're grown and we can go anywhere we want. Yeah, we're taking over the third ward. We're taking over those areas. And it's really, it is beautiful to see, because how much the city has worked to keep our racial divides divided, right? Like how much they've worked to keep us segregated. And although as far as home ownership and who has the homes where may still reflect this very strong, like redlined system, people are leaving those districts, they're leaving those places, and they're having fun, they're experiencing the city in a variety of ways, taking up space. And it's so funny, like I said, we only get 10 months, good 10 months, to be in the house. And then after that, we get a good 2.5 months to really be outside. And people are taking advantage. When friends visit Milwaukee, they're always just like, the city is so diverse. I'm like, it is. Because now we're unafraid. We feel we're very unafraid to just be. And yeah, we're gonna go out. We're gonna be seen. We're gonna be ourselves. We're gonna be loud. We're going to be everything that we know we are, because we are healing a part of ourselves and a part of our inner children that weren't allowed to. And that's what it always comes back to. I'm like, oh yeah, the reason why we always outside is because we couldn't be as kids. And now we're adults. And now we are adults that, really have a complicated understanding of what the digital age is doing to Black children and to radical thought and to all of these different systems that we encounter, that I think we all are just very eager to live, just to live and be free. I think that that's kind of what is happening now. We just want it to happen younger. We just want it to happen not when someone, pursues a degree, or when someone, I don't think it needs to take that trajectory for someone to be free. I'd rather kids just are given the ability to be free right away. As opposed to having to earn a degree or having to earn these things to accept some type of freedom or joy. I hate sometimes how much our professional success is tied to like our joy. And what we want in freedom. It's weird, but yeah.
I agree. I think it's a very limited understanding or lens of joy, but I also feel when you were saying that, it's like as adults, I think we're also given a choice. Are we going to be that same repressive force for freedom that we experienced as youth, or are we going to be folks who, you know, fight back against the geopolitical force to ensure freedom for our children? And I think that's something that even myself as an adult thinking about, like when I become a parent, how am I going to navigate through that, even outside of like the grander context of the city? But yeah.
And I give the kids credit. Let me tell you, I give them credit. I've seen some of the most amazing things during on campus when we were doing the encampments. I saw some beautiful Palestinian and Black solidarity that I honestly wish I had the opportunity to experience when I was in college or younger, right? Like these students have access to a world that, and they have access to so much information, and that they are smart. They know what they want. They know what they need. We just got to continue to create spaces for them to share those things.
Okay. I'm so sorry. I lost my thought because you were saying something and I had a question. It'll come back to me. But I do see some questions in the Q&A. I think this is more of a request than a question because I see Kip watching this remarkable film led me to think about using it in a middle school classroom here in Pittsburgh Public. Uh, and preceding the viewing, they did have a question. If you were making a film about the neighborhoods in Pittsburgh, East Hills, Homewood, Beltsuver, what would you focus on? What would you want people to know? Following the showing, with kids getting and having a chance to think and talking together. So this is more of an invitation, inviting you, Marquise, for a Zoom meeting to share questions and ideas. So yes, I believe it's a question with an invitation to come to Pittsburgh Public Schools and talk to the students.
I will be down for that. I'm always down to talk about experience because it is very kids have very varying experiences. So I'm very down to just hear what they got going on and like what is happening in their world that they feel is worthy of like showcasing in that way. So I love that. Yeah, I'll be down.
Okay, looking at the Q&A, I believe, unless there are burning questions, I believe that is all. But I would also like to say, Marquise, thank you so much for this generative conversation. And on behalf of everyone, I would like to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with us. But before we end, are there any upcoming projects that you're working on that you would like to let us know about?
Yeah, the life of the film. You one thing I want to mention is the life of the filmmaker is a lot. And I'm someone who doesn't enjoy labor, so it is really a lot going on in my world. But yeah, I'm getting ready to release my next film. I'm getting ready to release my next film. It is called Home Improvement. Like I said earlier, it is an experimental documentary where me, my dad, and my brother are doing a home improvement project as we talk about freedom, expression, and masculinity. Um, my most recent film is on PBS. It's called Black Strings. Black Strings is a film that follows a group of Black and brown musicians who play violins and all string instruments who go to active crime scenes in the city of Milwaukee and play a meditation on grief at the crime scene, kind of reconfiguring our understanding of what a first responder is by using music to find ways to allow people to feel things right away, as opposed to suppressing and becoming desensitized. And then upcoming, I'm in production for my next film, which is called Monikers. And Monikers is a film that surveys the Black American nicknames, just the wide variety of them. It's gonna be I think this is gonna be my funnest film, honestly. But ranging from the ages of 4 to 92, we are having people come and talk about the origin stories of the nicknames that they had growing up, trying to understand the relationship between double consciousness and our own self-identity, and just interrogating what it means to be Black with names that we get from elders and community members, and what does that mean for our perception of self. So got some stuff working, all about Black people, all about Milwaukee. Very excited.
Again, thank you so much for meeting with us. And with that being said, I would like to close out by thanking everyone who came into the space to learn from Professor Marquise Mays. Can we please give him a round of applause?
The emojis are sweet. Thank
Oh,
you.
yes. All right. Thank you all, and take care.